Hello and welcome. In today's episode, we're going to look at how can we replicate a damage system and a health system to have a health bar that updates on all of our clients at the same time when one of them takes damage. As you can see in our world, we have our player characters, each of them on a different team, well, two of them on the same team. If one of the players on the same team as another tries to damage each other, they don't take any damage from this projectile, but when they try and damage the red player, he takes damage, and as you can see, the damage is replicating on the health bar to all of our clients, and the red player can do the same back, and if the blue players are close to each other, they'll both take damage because we do a sphere overlap, but if they're not in the same radius, then they don't take damage together. As you can see, they were both taking damage because they were close to each other and the explosion was hitting each other. That's what we're looking at today, replicating a damage and health system. For our health system, we're going to make a component. So go to our multiplayer. In our blueprints folder, I think this is fine. We're going to make a new actor component and call it AC_health. It's really useful that we make this in a component because later when we make the bases, so the red and blue team base that you can destroy, we're also going to add this health component. So it makes our health system very modular and we can easily add it to new actors when we need to. We are going to add two variables. The first one is going to be called health, and that's going to be of type float. The second one is going to be called max health, also of type float. We're going to set both of them to have default values of 100, 100, and 100, and then we're going to replicate the health variable. We're not going to replicate the max health variable because we don't need to. When a client takes damage, they're going to tell all of the other clients how much health they have. So we're replicating the health, obviously, but for max health, there is no need to tell the other clients that we're replicating this. There's no need to tell the other clients what their max health is. We don't need to know that, right? They just need to know the current health. And also, when you replicate a variable, it does take more computational resources. It takes more effort from the engine to do because you've got to send it to all the clients. It adds more traffic in the network, which means there's more things happening. So if you keep making everything replicated, you're just going to slow down your game. So we only ideally want to replicate things where it's actually necessary. On event begin play, let's just search for event begin play. We're going to set our health to our max health. This is just to ensure that we've initialized both variables to 100, although you don't technically need this. I'm actually going to change this from replicated to rep notify, which means it is replicated, but every time it's updated, we have this little event called onRep health. We'll come back to that later because we're going to use it, and when we use it, I'll tell you more about what it does. But basically, this event fires every single time this health is updated. That's what rep notify means. Rep notified is replicated, but it also calls that event. We'll go more into that later. Now, we want two default custom events that we're going to use a lot. So the first custom event we're going to make is going to be called server_take damage. Of course, because we've called it server, we're going to run on the server and make it reliable. And this needs to take an input called damage amount of type float. Very nice. This function is going to fire every single time that someone takes damage. We run it on the server because if we run it on the owning client, like we saw in the last episode when we had that little problem with our team state not being replicated, if we only run it on the owning client, the only person who knows that the health has updated is that client. So if client 1 takes damage and it's run on owning client 1 will see that they've taken damage, but client 2, they don't know client 2 has taken damage because when client 1 did the take damage function, they only did it on their computer. So we need to replicate that on the server so the server can tell everyone, hey, this person has taken damage, everyone should know about it. That's why it's on the server. Very simply, this is going to set our current health to whatever our health is, subtracted by the damage amount, and we're going to check with a less or equal that we aren't less than 0, and if we are less than 0, then we're going to make another custom event to handle that. That custom event, we're going to make it down here, so make a new custom event, and we're going to call this server_player death. We don't need to make this a replicated custom event yet because we are going to fire an event. When we come to handling this, what we're going to do is we're going to get our player, and then we're going to tell our player that they've died, and the player side logic, we're going to do that on the server. So this doesn't need to be on the server yet, but later we're going to fire another event off here, and that will be on the server. So you can leave this as just a custom event for now. That's fine, because later we're going to make that. We're going to call this function, obviously, after the true pin. So call server death, server player death. I forgot what I'd called it. By the time I'd gone from here to here, I'd already forgot. That is not very good. But that is all we need for now in here. On our unrep health, let's talk about this. Like I said in the last video, when we looked at our health bar, when I was talking about how we set up the team, we did a bind, and I told you that wasn't very good, but I wanted to show you both ways of doing things so you know how to do it in both the different ways. You can bind things and you can do event-based systems. Or event-driven systems rather. When we set up this health system to link in with the widget, we are going to set this up in an event-driven way. So we know every time this unrep health fires, our health variable has updated. That's what rep notify means. It means it's replicated and we get this function firing every single time our health updates. So instead of binding our health to the bar, which means every single frame we're checking what our health is, instead, every single time we want to update our health, we can just call this function. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make an event dispatcher called, let's say, on health update. I'm going to compile and save. Let's drag it out, call it after onRep health, and on this on health update event dispatcher, let's go to the top right where it says input, add a new parameter, and call this health. Now I'm going to briefly resume what this does. There's an error because we haven't filled in the parameter, but we're going to do that in just a second. What an event dispatcher does is it's like, the best analogy I have for it is the ping of a microwave. This sound goes off and whoever's listening to it can decide to do something. Everyone who wants to listen to this event dispatcher is told whenever it happens, and then they can decide what to do on it. Everyone has their own implementation of what they're going to do, and not everyone has to do the same thing. And if you don't decide to listen to it, you're not told when it goes off. But if you listen to the event, I'll show you how to do that in a second, then you will be notified when it updates. And because we've added this input parameter, we will, update our health. For that input parameter, we'll put in our health. So that error, if you're getting that error, right click on the core health update, click on refresh nodes, and then plug it in. The reason we got that error, it's because we had dragged in the event dispatcher and we'd called it, and then we changed the input. So the input had changed whilst it was in the event graph, and the engine didn't like that. So you can either delete it and then place it back, or just right click and press refresh nodes, and now it's working. Compile and save. I'm considering making a specific video on event dispatchers, on what they are, when we use them, and some examples. If you're interested in seeing a dedicated video, it will just be like 10-15 minutes of me showing you how to use them, explaining it. It probably won't be a follow along, more of just an explanatory video. Let me know in the comments. Tell me. I love to hear your guys' feedback. It really helps when you guys leave comments, because then I can better tailor my new episodes to you. If you leave a comment and you tell me what tutorials you want, then I can make the tutorials that you want to see. So if you want to see a tutorial specifically on event dispatchers, just like a one-off one, I would love to do that. So let me know if that would interest you guys. Anyways, right, let's go on to the next step. In our health bar component now, we want to be able to go from the health bar to the AC_health, to the health component, to have access to the health. So in our variables, we're going to add a new variable, and I'm going to call this health component. It's going to be of type AC health, which is what our component is called. Compile and save. This needs to be instance editable and expose on spawn, because on event begin play, in our top-down character, when we create this, let's refresh. Now you can see we can also input the health component. So let's add a health component to our character, AC_health, and we can drag that health component in. So now when we create the health bar widget, we're passing through the health component that we have on our character, which is very nice. So our health bar now has access to the health component of our player. Let's search for event construct. Event construct. We are going to bind that event now. So we're going to make the health component listen, or the widget listen to the health component. So whenever this is fired inside the health component, the health bar widget will know about it and can react accordingly, which will be updating the percent on the progress bar. To start with, off of event construct, we are going to get our progress bar and we're going to say set percent. We're doing this first just to initialize everything because we need to make sure our health bar starts on the right health to start with. We can't just bind the event first, we need to make sure it's on the right health. And to get the right health, we get our health component. We're going to get our health, we're going to get our max health. We're going to divide our health by our max health and then input it. This in percent is expecting a value between 0 and 1. So we divide our health by our max health because if we have 100 over 100, that's 100%. If we have 50 over 100, that's 0.5. 50%, you get the point. This expects a value between 0 and 1, not an actual percentage. And then after we have initially set what the progress bar is going to be, we can then get our health component and we can search for assign health update. So now we are listening, we have bound to the event, we are listening for whenever this fires. Every single time this fires, we are notified here with the health. So we can set the percentage of the progress bar to this new health divided by the max health, which we can get from our progress bar again. So search for get max. Why is it not there? Because that's the progress bar, silly me. Off the health component, we can get the max health. Definitely can't get it from the percentage bar itself. Now we do the health divided by the max health, and we can set the percent. I don't know why I did this up here. Make sure it's on this event, this custom event, and we can set the percent to this percent. So whenever our health is updated, the widget is going to know about it. This event is going to fire and we're going to set the health. This is going to be replicated to all of the clients because this health variable is replicated, and whenever we take damage on the health component, we run it on the server. Let's go and make a little test function to make sure this is working. So let's go to bp_top-down character at the top. Before we use keyboard 2, now we're going to use keyboard event 1. Of course, if you're making this into a proper game, you're not just going to use keyboard events, but this is just for testing purposes. So it's fine, we don't need proper input actions yet. AC health, search for server, take damage. We'll just send across 10 damage. Then we will compile, save that. The very final thing we have to do before we can run this is in our AC_health component, click on class defaults and make sure to click on component replicate. I did forget to say that before, I apologize. But if we don't click on component replicates, then it's not going to replicate, even though this is set to replicate. But yeah, once you click on component replicates, now it is allowed to replicate. So when we run our game, it always takes a while to load, but we will see that when we update the health on one of our characters, all the other characters are going to see the same health change because we're replicating it. I could show you whilst we're in the default lobby because it does work, but the health bar is all in white, so it's a bit harder to see. I don't know if you can see there, but the health bars are going down. We'll go into the actual map just to make sure we can really clearly see it in action. We've got our 3 characters now, the one in the middle on all 3 screens. Every single time I press 1, his health goes down by 10%. It's the same on the other ones. They can all see the health going down. And now we have our replicated health bar. Now, of course, we haven't the actual damage and attack system yet, but the health system is all working, as we can see. So yeah, let's move on to the next part. The next thing we're going to do is create the actual attack and damage system. So I am going to make one rather simple attack. We're not going to make it too fancy because the point of this series, really, as you know, is to teach the multiplayer principles. There's no point me going on about how to make fancy attack combos because ultimately that's not to do with multiplayer. We need to learn about how we can replicate damage, how we can replicate components, where the functions are run. So if you want to see advanced attack systems, let me know in the comments. I will definitely make a series on it if there's enough interest. But for now, we're going to keep it with quite a simple attack because otherwise it's a waste of your time for people who just want to know about multiplayer. We are going to make an attack where when you press 1 on your keyboard, you're going to fire a projectile in front of you. The projectile is going to be replicated so everyone can see it moving at the same time. Then when the projectile hits one of the targets, it's going to do some area damage and show a little effect. And yeah, it's going to replicate the damage to all of the people. So let's go to our content drawer. In our blueprints folder, we're going to right click, blueprint class actor, and call this BP_projectile. Open this up. We're going to add a static mesh. I'm going to make the static mesh a sphere, just the default sphere shape that we have. I'm going to change the scale to 0.25, actually 0.25, is that a bit small? 0.5, I think. And I'm going to move it down a little bit so it's nearer to the middle of the world. There we go, that's fine to me. Compile and save. On the static mesh, we're going to add a sphere collision. And then just in general, on the component, we're going to add a projectile movement. There we go, compile and save. We are not going to forget to click on replicates this time. To start with, we're going to go to class defaults. And if we search for replicate, we're going to click on replicates movement and replicates. This means that when, the projectile spawn into the world and it's moving, everyone is going to see it. The server is going to update the information to all the different clients so everyone can see the same projectile moving at the same time. Let's now go and let's make sure we have the right collision on our mesh. So search for collision. I'm going to change this from block dynamic to custom. I'm going to put to overlap everything apart from block visibility and camera. This means we're going to overlap everything, so we'll have some overlap events running apart from blocking visibility and camera, just so if you wanted to have some traces running, then it collides with those traces. And on our sphere, that is all correct. Now let's set the default settings for projectile movement. I'm going to say initial speed is going to be 1000, max speed is going to be 1000, rotation follows velocity, and projectile gravity scale is going to be 0. So basically there's no gravity and it's going to start very fast moving in one direction. Yeah, that's what the component's going to do. Pretty simple stuff, really. We're going to add 3 variables to our projectile. We're going to add damage, explosion radius, and the owning player. So let's add the first one, damage. It's going to be of type float. And it's going to be instance editable and expose on spawn. This does not need to be replicated because this variable, this is just going to be the player who spawns the projectile is going to tell the projectile, through it being instant editable and expose on spawn, is going to tell the projectile how much damage to do when it hits something, and the projectile is going to then tell people how much damage they've taken. But when we call the take damage function, as we know, that runs on the server. The damage, we don't need to replicate the damage, there's no point. Same thing with explosion radius. This needs to be a float. It needs to be instance editable and expose on spawn, so the player can tell them, how large of a radius they'd like to do, but it doesn't need to be replicated. And finally, the owner player is going to be a reference to who is spawning this little projectile. We're going to make this of type BP_top down character, object reference, again, instance editable and expose on spawn, so the player can pass that information through. We can get rid of these bottom 2 events. We're going to take event begin play, and all we're going to do to start off with the logic is we're going to say delay by 10 seconds. You might want to put more, you might want to put less. Then we're going to do an is valid check. Not that one, we want the normal is valid check. Is valid on self. And if we are valid, we're going to say destroy actor. Now that might look completely random. You might be thinking, why has he done that? Well, the reason we're doing this is because if we don't destroy the projectile at some point, if it misses any targets and just travels through the world, it's going to be infinitely traveling forever, and we don't want that. That's just a complete waste of calculations. The computer wants to stop trying to think about it after it has been in the world for some time. It's firing at 1000 meters per second, or 10 meters per second, sorry. It goes to centimeters. on event begin play, if it hasn't hit something within 10 seconds, given we're in quite a small map, it's going to be well without the map, and we're going to delete it just so we don't have to think about it anymore. You might want to change how this is handling, but this is purely an optimization thing. When it comes to the actual logic of colliding and doing damage, that's what we're going to look at right now. So let's go to the sphere. Let's scroll down and let's click on component begin overlap. Let's bring this down here. Now the first thing we want to do is say switch has authority, because the only person who is allowed to deal damage is the server. The client themselves are not allowed to deal damage. The clients can spawn in a sphere, that is okay, the clients can spawn in a sphere, but they're going to have to spawn in the sphere on the server, so the server is the one who's responsible of providing damage when someone's hit. We do not want to run it on remote, we do not want to run this on clients, because the server is the referee of the match. He knows when people are getting damaged, he sort of hands out the damage, all the damage has to go through the server, so we're going to run this only on authority. The next thing we're going to do is we want to check, first of all, is the actor we hit a player? Now we don't have a way to do that yet. Well, we do, but not an easy one. The easy one we're going to go with is actor has tag. So go to BP_top-down characters, go to class default and search for tag. Add a new tag and just call it player. Make sure to copy that exactly. So when we go back to our projectile, we can drag off of other actor and search for actor has tag. The tag we're querying is that one we just made. So if we do a branch now, we are checking, are we running on the server? Yes, carry on. Is the thing we just hit a player? If it is, then yes, carry on. Now the next thing we need to check is the team of the thing we just hit. You see, if we're trying to hit something that has the same team as our owner player, which we can get by dragging in our owner player and saying get team. If the thing we just hit has the same team as our owner player, we do not want to do damage, so we need a way to get the team of this. Now we don't know for certain that this is a type of BP_top-down character, so we can't just drag off and say get team. I'm going to make an interface function for getting this team. So let's go to our content drawer. Let's go to our interfaces folder, which is in multiplayer interfaces. I'm going to open up match player. I'm going to implement this interface onto our player character. If you want to have a separate interface for the player character and the player controller, you could make one here. But for me in this system, we don't really need to think about how interfaces work. We're just talking about multiplayer. So let's just keep it simple and put it on here. Let's add a new function called get team, which is of course going to output the team. So make a variable called team output the enumeration for e_team. Compile and save. Now on the top-down character, go to class settings, scroll down to where it says implemented interfaces and search for int_match player. Then we have this function for getting the team. We can input the team. Very nice. Now back onto our projectile of the other actor, we can simply search for get team, and we will now have the team of the thing we've just hit, assuming the thing we've just hit is a player and has this function implemented. So now we can check, are these not equal? Because if they are equal, we want to do nothing. We don't want to do anything. So not equal, you have to say not equal enum to get that to work. Just the not equals will work. But on the branch, if this is true, it means they're not on the same team. So now we would like to continue with the damage and logic. We are going to do a sphere overlap actors. Sphere overlap actors, because not only are we going to damage the thing we've just hit, but when we hit something, we're going to do a radius around we've just hit, and then anything in that radius is going to get damaged. So it's going to be an explosion. So we're going to hit something, do an explosion, and anything in that explosion radius will be damaged. So a little bit more interesting than just simply damage the thing we've hit. The sphere radius is going to be the explosion radius, which we just inputted. The sphere position is going to be the location of the projectile. So we're going to say get actor location and input that into the sphere position. The object types, we're going to press make array, and these are all the different objects that we're saying this thing can overlap, all the things we can check with. I'm going to say pawn and world dynamic, which just means the pawn will say like all our characters are pawn, and the world dynamic, just because sometimes you might want to have like destructible objects. You don't need this, but in case you wanted to, I like to add it. And the actors to ignore, we're going to make this array. Well, we don't want to overlap with our self, so let's input self, not static mesh. We just want a reference to self, get a reference to self. And the other thing we want to ignore is the owning player, which we have because we added that as a variable, instant edible and expose and spawn. So input the owning player and ourself, so we will not overlap with ourself. And of the out actors, if we do a for each loop, we can now loop through everything we know we've just overlapped with and do damage to them. So firstly, off this array element, which is the individual thing we've just hit, we're going to say get component by class. And the component we're trying to get is going to be AC_health. So we're now checking, is the actor we've just overlapped a member, or does it possess this component? Does it possess the AC health component? And we can check with an is valid if it does. If this returns a valid, it means the thing we've just hit has the AC health component implemented. If this returns not valid, it means the thing we've hit does not have that implemented. So even though it's a player and it has this function and it is a pawn, it hasn't got the AC health, so we're going to do nothing because we can't really do anything. But if it has this function implemented, we are again going to check that it doesn't have the same team as the thing that is throwing the projectile. We need to do the check again because this first check here is to make sure the first thing we hit didn't have the same team. But because we're doing a sphere overlap radius, if we have two players stood really close to each other and they're all on the same team, the first player gets hit, okay, we know not to damage him. But if the second one next to him happens to have this overlap, then he could then get damaged. So we need to again check that the people in the overlap are not on the same team. But we already have that function on the interface, so we search just for get team, nice and easy. And we can again get the owner player and just search for get team because we made it of type BP_top down character. And if these are not equal enum, I always forget to do that. Not equal enum, you can't just say not equal, it doesn't work. We're going to do a branch. And if this fires true, it means the thing we've hit is not on the same team as us, so we're fine to damage them, and we can get the health component, and we can say server take damage, which is the function we created for applying damage. The damage amount is going to be this damage that we are going to pass in from the player. And then the thing I want to do now is say play an event. More specifically, play an event that spawns in an explosion. Now we already have the explosion in the default like template. If you've added the default project settings, not the default project settings, when you first make a project, if you include the default project stuff, you will have this by default. So you've already got this. You don't need to worry about importing it. Everyone's already got it. It's just the default explosion template. Let's make a custom event and let's call this multicast spawn emitter at location. And then we're going to say, drag off here and say spawn emitter. Nope, not the multicast one. Spawn emitter. Why is it doing that? Is it just emitter maybe? Emitter. Wait, what's going on? Okay, I've got it now. I have no idea why that wasn't coming up, but here we go. So we've got spawn emitter at location. Just search for that function. We're going to pass these first few things through as variables, the template, location, rotation, and scale. And this custom event, we're going to set it to being a multicast function. That's why we're doing this as its own custom event rather than just adding it up here, because we need to make sure that when we spawn this effect, it's not only spawned on the client, not only spawned on the server, but it's spawned on everyone. And that's what a multicast does. It spawns it on the server and on the client. So all the clients are told about it and the server's told about it as well. Now, sometimes we don't have to use a multicast event, sometimes it's good enough to just do a server event. Like when we updated our health on the health component, we run this on the server. We don't need to say do a multicast. We can just say run on server and it automatically updates everyone. That is because we have a health variable which is already marked as replicated, which is already on everyone. Everyone already has this variable and it's replicated, so when it's updated on the server, that update is reflected down to all the clients. However, on the projectile, this spawn emitter at location, well, we've never done this before. We've never come across the emitter at location. We don't already have a variable of type emitter. There's nothing here. This is like the first time we're adding this. So we have to run it on everything, because by default, if the server has this, there's nothing to update. You know, the server will only update the changes to all the clients if there is a variable that change was made to. This isn't changing a variable. This isn't changing something replicated. So we have to do this as a multicast event. Okay. So we're going to get the AC component over here. We're just going to do is valid check just to make sure it's still valid, and then we're going to call the multicast spawn emitter at location function. The emitter template is p_explosion. This is the one, like I was saying before, it comes by default. We have all these ones by default with the engine. If you just opened up a default template project, I didn't import that. You should have that by default. If you didn't, it's because you didn't include the default like project assets when you made your project, but this is the default stuff. And the location, we are going to say get actor location of the thing we've just hit, get actor location, and we're going to plug this into the location. Now we're going to compile and save. Now finally, we just need to spawn in this projectile. We've made it, we set up all the logic for making our projectile do something. So now on our BP_top-down character, where we have this one keyboard event, instead of just automatically taking damage, we want to make a new custom event to spawn in the projectile. Now, if you remember, when we had our projectile, we did this switch has authority to make sure that this damage is only running on the server. And I said to you that was okay, because we know we're only going to spawn this on the server. So in our top-down character, when we make our custom event, so we'll make a custom event, we're going to call this server_spawn projectile. And of course, we're going to make this replicate on run on server and as reliable. Compile and save. So when we press 1, we're going to call to this function. So server spawn projectile. This means the projectile is being spawned on the server. It's going to be replicated to all the clients, but ultimately the logic for spawning and applying damage is ran on the server, because we do not want the client to be able to control applying damage, because otherwise if someone tried to install hacks, it's a lot easier to install hacks and apply damage if you're running things on the server, or rather on the client instead of the server, because the client, you know, the player has more access to the client than the server. The player cannot easily access the server, but they can the client because their machine is the client. It's also just good practice and proper programming structure, to be honest. So what do we want to do when we have this custom event fire? Well, we want to spawn an actor. So spawn actor from class. That class is going to be BP_projectile, of course. BP_projectile. But we need to put in these default values. I'm going to put in a damage of 10. I'm going to put in an explosion radius of 250. And the owner player, I'm going to drag off and just search for self, get a reference to self. The spawn transform, which is why we're seeing this error, because we haven't put in the spawn transform. I'm going to make transform, and into the location, I'm going to say get actor location. So we're going to spawn this at our actor's location, and the rotation, well, we want this to fire in a straight line from where our character's facing. If we leave this how it's facing now, it would spawn next to the character, but it would just, you know, go in a straight line wherever. But we want this to specifically go in front of the character where the character is looking. So we're going to search for get actor forward vector, which gets the forward vector of the character. It finds the vector from where the character is facing. We're going to multiply this by 100. So convert that to an integer or a float, and multiply by 100. And then search for rotation from X vector and plug that into the rotation, compile and save. Now, if we go and run the game, we will see that this is working. Now, due to how our system is set up, whilst our character is in the lobby, we cannot damage the other players because we specified if the person we're hitting is of the same team as the player, it's not going to do any damage. And you might be thinking, well, the players can't be on the same team because they don't have a team. But they do have a team. Their team is none, right? Technically, none or default is a team, and these guys all have that same team. So technically, when we're seeing if these guys are the same team, they do have the same team on the enum. So we need to go into our actual map. So accept for everyone, load them into the actual battle map. And I really like that. I think I didn't really plan on having that. It just kind of, fortunately came into play. But now we can see, if I click on 1 and fire at the blue guy, we're doing damage. But if I fire at the red guy, it's going through him and we're not doing any damage. Remember when I said to have a 10-second delay before we spawn the projectiles? Well, that's because if we fire them into the air and they're just firing, those will continue forever, basically, because we've never told them to stop. But after 10 seconds, they're going to destroy or get destroyed, and then we don't have to worry about them anymore. And if the blue guy hits one of the red guys, that sphere radius is large enough to go over both of them. But if one of them runs away, goes a bit further, now only one of them is taking damage because they're not in that sphere radius in the explosion. Very nice. I was wondering why the emitter wasn't spawning, and I've come back and I've looked at the node setup, and everything's right except in this scale we left this as 0, 0, 0, so it's spawning the emitter, and the emitter is spawning, but the scale is 0, so it's 0% on all of the axis. So we need to put this to 1, not 0.1, 1, 1 and 1, so it's like actual 100% of its size. So now if we play, we'll see the emitter spawning. So it was technically spawning, but it was so small that we just couldn't see it because the scale was 0. So it had like 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, 0 on the Z, so it was just like basically not there. But now we've put it to its normal size by adding those scale values to 1, 1 and 1. So when we fire the projectiles at the enemies, we will now see the explosion. Wait for it to load. Boom, explosion. And if they stand a little further apart, you can see the explosions happening on each of them, because when one of them gets fired, then we do the sphere overlap and we see them. In the next episode, we're going to look at how can we make sure that when our player has been damaged until it has no more health, how is it going to die? Thank you. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next episode when we're going to look at how to do that.